perceive the depth. You can't really see depth. You can understand depth because you have two eyes looking at this thing and you get what's called depth perception. I said, I got it. But actually, you could take a photograph of what you're looking at and it would still look the same. You would perceive the depth because of our common experience, but you can't really see depth. I said, I got it. He said, now suppose you want to introduce yourself to Mr. Flat and Mrs. Flat. So you stick your finger through the table, and Mr. Flat comes over and looks at it and says, oh, I see a circle, the cross-section of your finger. Over here you stick 3 fingers through the table, and Mrs. Flat comes and looks at him and says, oh, honey, I've seen Kent Hovind. He's 3 circles. Mr. Flat says, no, honey, he's 1 circle. And they're going to fight for a while and argue, and finally they're going to split the church and start the church of the 3 circles and the church of the 1 circles. But the fact is, neither one of them has a clue what I'm like. You simply can't put a 3-dimensional being into 2 dimensions. They're not going to ever get it. Well, if you read Ephesians chapter 3, it says that we may be able to comprehend with all saints what is the length and depth and breadth and height. The length and depth and breadth and height. There's 4 dimensions. I think there's an awful lot more to God than we can possibly comprehend in our little 3-dimensional world. Just like Mr. Flat and Mrs. Flat are not going to get it about a 3-dimensional person, I don't think we 3-dimensional persons are ever going to get it to understand God. But when we get to heaven, we shall see Him, we shall be like Him, for we shall see Him as He is. Then we're going to say, oh, now I understand. And there are these guys going around saying God has 10 dimensions. I think that's heresy. God is infinite. He's not limited by anything whatsoever. He is absolutely God. By definition, it would have to be not limited by time, space, or matter. Next question. What about the races? Where do they come from? Well, there's no question there's a lot of different looking people on this planet. Black ones and white ones and yellow ones and tall ones and little ones, etc. But there really aren't any races. There are skin colors. There's only one race. It's called the human race. Would you say these are different races of cows? No, they're just different skin colors. Okay, and I can assure you they all look the same in the meat locker, and they all taste the same on the hamburger. Okay, they're just different skin colors, that's all. There are 4 theories of where the races come from. I don't know which is true. I suspect I do, but I'll just give you the 4 theories and tell you what I believe. One theory says Adam and Eve are medium brown, and they produced all the races, all the colors in their own children. Could be true. There's an albino, 3 albino children born to a black couple. It's just an interesting bit of trivia here. The second theory, which I do not believe, it says the Lord put a mark on Cain in Genesis chapter 4, lest any finding him should kill him. And they say Cain became a black person. I don't buy this for 1 second, but a lot of churches do. The Mormon church teaches that the Negroes are not equal with other races. This is what the Mormon church teaches in their doctrine book here in 1966. They say it's the Lord's doing. It's based on His eternal laws of justice and grows out of a lack of spiritual valiance of those concerned in their first estate. Lack of spiritual valiance. What do they mean here? Well, I had a couple Mormon missionaries knock on my door one time, and they said, Mr. Hovind, we'd like to talk to you about the Lord. I said, that'd be great, fellas. Which Lord would you like to talk about, yours or mine? They said, oh, we serve the same God. I said, no, fellas, I'm sorry. We serve a different God. I said, let me show you here. Does your God have a body like mine? They said, yep, we believe He does. I said, okay, my Bible says God's a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. I said, does your God live on the planet Kolob, K-O-L-O-B? They said, yeah, we believe He does. I said, well, my Bible says God is all places. The eyes of the Lord are everywhere. He's not living on a planet. He's every place at the same time. That's God. I said, does your God have thousands of wives? He said, yeah, we believe He does. I said, does your God have normal physical relations with those wives and produce spirit children up in heaven? They said, yeah, we believe He does. I said, now, does your God produce the spirit in heaven, and the human couple on earth only produces the body? Is that what you guys teach? They said, yeah, that's correct. I said, now, if the spirit baby in heaven is a valiant spirit baby, if it's a good spirit baby, when it comes to earth, it gets a white-skinned body. But if it's a bad spirit baby, it gets a black-skinned body. Is that what you believe? They said, well, you're not supposed to know that, but yeah, that is what we teach. I said, fellas, I know you got the little tag on that says elder, even though you're 17. I said, I've been married, now it's been nearly 30 years. I said, I've got 3 children, grown, got grandchildren. I said, I taught biology and anatomy. I used to raise hamsters. I said, did you know there are 2 babies born on earth every second, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop? And your God supplies a spirit for each one. I said, when does he get time to answer your prayers? Of course, they knocked the dust off their feet, and they never came back. I don't know what happened to them. But the Mormon Church teaches that the Negroes are a result of a lack of spiritual valiance in the first estate. That is stupid, okay? That's not true. They say, Cain, Ham, and the whole Negro race were cursed with a black skin, the mark of Cain. Peterson said, if a Mormon apostle, if there's one drop of Negro blood in my children, they receive the curse. Brigham Young said, shall I tell you the law of God in regard to the African race? If the white man who belongs to the chosen seed mixes his blood with the seed of Cain, the penalty under the law of God is death on the spot. This will always be so. There's a good book you ought to get called The Secret History of the Mormon Church to see what's happened, how many people were killed trying to leave the Mormon Church. I mean, it was a serious thing in the early days. I don't know if it still is. I would hope not, but it certainly was. Read the book about secret history. Okay, the third theory about the races says that Noah put a curse on Canaan, his grandson, Canaan. Genesis 9 says, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servant shall he be. Genesis 9:26, Canaan shall be a servant. Canaan's a servant. Some people think that Canaan became the first black man, and the black people are supposed to be servants. I think that's silly, that's dumb, it's not true. But those verses were used to justify slavery during the Civil War here in America. That's not where the races came from. Canaan was not the first black man. The fourth, and I think the most reasonable theory, is that the skin colors came as a result of the Tower of Babel. After the flood, God told them to spread out, have lots of kids, and move around the world. Well, they didn't. They disobeyed God. They stayed in one place, and they tried to build this big tower. Genesis 10:5 says, by these were the isles of the Gentiles divided, in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. I think what happened at the Tower of Babel, they broke up into languages, and people had to travel off, and those that spoke French went together, and those that spoke German went together, and they ended up, you got to marry into this little group. So you have close inbreeding, and if you marry cousins or sisters or nieces for a few generations, you're going to have a redneck after a while. Very unusual traits will become pronounced. This is what happened to the Habsburg dynasty. They had to marry royalty. Well, pretty soon they started looking really strange. Long nose, weird looking face, great big chins, 6 fingers, sometimes hemophiliacs. I mean, a lot of serious problems in the Habsburg dynasty. But Genesis 10:32 said the families of Noah is what created the nations and also the languages. There's a good book by Bill Cooper you can get called After the Flood, which deals with this topic in great detail. One of Noah's sons, Japheth, in Genesis chapter 10, had about 14 kids or grandkids. It's kind of tough to count. If you go through Genesis, you'll see. It's called the Table of Nations. Very interesting story. But Ham had 31, roughly 31 kids or grandkids, and one of those was Canaan. It's only one of his 31 kids and grandkids. The Bible teaches us that Egypt is the land of Ham. It says so in Psalm 105. Egypt is the land of Ham. And in Psalm 106 it says, the wondrous works in the land of Ham, which is Egypt. There's not a whole lot of question among most Bible scholars that Africa is the land of Ham, the Hamites. So Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Ham settled this direction down in Africa. And the black people predominantly originated from Africa. The Japhethites, the descendants of Japheth, became the Europeans. They traveled over this way. And the Shemites became the Orientals. They traveled, Chinese, Japanese, etc. Shem had about 29 kids or grandkids. Makes up a total of roughly probably 75 original languages. So I think the original, after the Tower of Babel, broke up into maybe 60, 70, 80, or 100 different language groups. I think it's pretty obvious that probably English, German, and Danish had an original root language